Welcome to Frame of Reference, informed, intelligent conversations about the issues and challenges facing everyone in today's world. In-depth interviews to help you expand and inform your frame of reference. Now here's your host, Raul Labreche.
Well, welcome everyone to another edition of Frame of Reference, Profiles in Leadership. And today, it's my distinct honor, pleasure, and just plain old good time to be able to talk with a gentleman that I spent some time, I believe it was like early winter-ish or midwinter-ish, cold days back in February, January, and my guest today, Jack Canfora and I got to talk to each other on this podcast, and I had one of those kindred spirit kind of moments, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot. If you didn't have a kindred moment, think of it like a date, that when, one person thinks it's wonderful, the other person thinks it's like, yeah. So,
No, not at all.
Just to talk with somebody that's in the biz in general, too, in theater as an art, was just such a joy in so many ways. So Jack agreed to come back and talk with me. I am speaking with none other than John Lawrence Jack Canfora. So I saw that today. It stood out to me, Jack, when I saw that John Lawrence. I imagined your mom going, John Lawrence, and you would know.
It's I'm named after my dad, obviously, and so they didn't want to have two people with the same name in the house because, it would be difficult to tell which one she was yelling at any given moment. So
and you don't need to take the other one's stuff. That's just not necessary. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So Jack is an award-winning American playwright. He's an actor. He's a musician and a teacher. Received his dramatic training at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. Began his career as an actor in regional theater, working mostly in Shakespearean roles, things like Mercutio and Macbeth. Those are small parts, aren't they, if I remember right?
Yes.
Yeah. Very few line members, little line members.
Well, very few lines, I ended up cutting a lot. So, yeah.
And then, it's just like, I forgot that scene. Let's just skip that tonight. So he's been hailed, I say, by the Associated Press as white-hot entertainment for his off-Broadway plays, including Poetic License, Place Setting, and Jericho, and is a New York Times critic's pick. So that, America, is why Jack and I are talking today, because Jack is important and I am not. So, and you need to all know more about him. But I, as a person who is steeped in theater, I have lots of places my heart wants to go in talking with Jack every time I talk to him. So, Jack, thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be back. I had a great time, and I'm looking forward to today.
So Jack, I since we talked last time, remember we always start out with the My Favorite Things portion of the podcast. So I thought I kind of was trying to run through where are some new favorite things I could do with you to really stump you. So this is a Stump the Jack time. Okay. So Jack, what is your favorite play?
That's mean.
Yes, man.
Well, okay. So I'm gonna put them in two categories. I'm gonna say like Shakespeare and then other plays.
Okay.
And I would have to say, as cliched as it is, probably my favorite Shakespeare play is Hamlet. In the non-Shakespeare category, I might have to go with, again, it's a cliche, but I might have to go with Death of a Salesman, Arthur Miller. I'm also a huge fan of especially the first part of Angels in America by Tony Kushner.
Okay.
But yeah, gosh, I wish I had something more imaginative, but yeah, we'll go with those.
Well, but isn't that the thing with favorite plays, favorite music, favorite artist, whatever? To me, it's all about kind of where we are at any given point too.
Right.
Someone I was talking not too long ago said their favorite book is the one they're reading right now.
Yeah, that's so true, and it's a question too of like what sort of a think test where it's the first thing that comes to your mind. And so right now, this morning, those are my answers. Another time, I might very well say Long Day's Journey Tonight, or for example, I think August Osage County, like Tracy Letts. is among my favorite plays. I think it's one of the best American plays of this century, certainly. There's a play by Lucas Nath called The Christians, which is just eats me up with envy every time I read it because I wish I had written it. And there are lots of, and there's no end of great plays. But yeah, those are the first ones that pop into my head.
So what is your favorite thing about what a favorite play has? I mean, are there elements there that you go, oh, I'm going to like reading this from almost the first moment you start reading it?
Well, it's a really good question. I don't know that I have one set of criteria. For example, I love Edward Albee's plays as well. Like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is such a remarkable play. And one of the things I love about it is its sense of humor. And so, but for example, Death of a Salesman has actually one or two humorous moments in it, but it's really not funny in any real way.
Right.
Miller's not known for his jokes, although there are a couple of, and there are actually two jokes I can think of in Death of a Salesman that both land, but it's not a funny play. The giveaway is in the title. So it's just like you're absorbed in the character's world. And there's 100 different ways to get to that. And playwrights do it differently. Like, for example, I'm using these sort of old sort of classics as examples. I mean, Longest Journey into Night is, to me, absorbing, hypnotically so, from the first page. The dialogue isn't really very good, but it's the characters and the way they, O'Neill builds their world, and their psychology is so rich and so thorough and so immediately real and accessible that you absolutely buy into these people's worlds. So, Fences by August Wilson really has a little bit of everything. It's got some humor, it's got some beautiful poetry, it's got a compelling character. I mean, August Wilson sort of, is, we're talking about baseball players, and the lead character in Fences was a baseball player. August Wilson was a five-tool playwright. He could do it all. And so it varies. Like, Miller isn't great on humor, but he brings so many other things to the table. I wish I could give you a clear answer on that. Tony Kushner in Angels in America deals with incredibly serious, heartbreaking, sweeping and important topics, but does so with great wit and also some great poetry. I think if I had to narrow it down to one thing, it would be that I have to be sort of psychologically engaged and believe that these are real people dealing with stressful things. And there's 100 ways of portraying that and doing that. But I guess that probably is the one common denominator. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it's something about getting older. As we record this, I'm coming up on 63 years. And it's the point where, like Picard says in one of the Star Trek movies, I've begun to realize that there are fewer days ahead of me than there are behind me. So, yes. But that kind of resonates with me, the plays that I've read lately. And I think, honestly, to a large extent, the plays that I read of yours just recently, where you have that moment of just going, this is an important thing that these people are dealing with. These words that are being said here by this character in this context have a much greater, much deeper issue at the root of them that we all need to talk about. And the play provides the cocoon, I guess, if you will, where that can get talked about. And I'm looking more and more. It's honestly, I like plays that make me laugh. I love the line in Jericho about, it's not that I always had my shit together, but at least it was within walking distance. But so those things can make, that should be a classic. Everyone should be saying that on the streets regularly. But I guess I look more and more for a play that just makes me stop and think more. And maybe that's a reflection of the world we live in, where there's so little of that. It's like we're almost being, pushed into not thinking ever, because if we take a second to look at the man behind the curtain, we'll go, oh my God, this isn't anything I thought it was, right?
Actively discouraged. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. That's true. As a man I'm friendly with. I wouldn't be so presumptuous to say he's a friend of mine, but he's a very well-known stand-up comic named Gary Goldman, and he's had a bunch of specials on HBO and Netflix. And he was doing a set recently in which he's about my age. And he said he hasn't done any plastic surgery, and he was talking about the worry line sort of in between the eyebrows. And he says he doesn't trust anyone his age who doesn't have those, because if you're not looking at the world constantly and sort of making that scrunched up face of incredulity, he can't trust you. And so I think that's probably true. I mean, most of the world does sort of conspire wittingly or unwittingly to sort of distract you. And one of the things I think plays do really well is they, like a good novel too, but plays will sort of demand, a lot of the great ones will demand you spend time dealing with something very serious that affects us all. And that's not to say it's not done without great humor and entertainment, and it's hopefully never preachy. But yeah, so it's sort of it allows you more time to dig into these issues. But again, it has to be done in an entertaining way.
What's your favorite hobby?
I love to play guitar. I would say guitar off the top of my head, playing guitar and singing.
Okay. So do you write your own stuff or just do covers?
I used to a lot. When I was younger, I wanted to be a songwriter, but I wrote some songs and when I was younger, but I drifted away from that because, for a confluence of reasons. I think mostly that like at 20 or 21, I thought, well, I don't think I think I could be an okay songwriter. I don't think I would be a really great songwriter. And so, and in fact, in the play that my New Normal rep has online for free, it's not a musical at all, but there's music in between scenes and stuff like that. And I wrote that with my friend Rob Koenig. And it's nothing, to say I wrote that music even sounds a little bit pompous for what it is. We came up with the tunes, but yeah, so I still do that a lot. So that's fun.
Okay, how about let's do something really arcane, bizarre. Mm-hmm. How about your favorite piece of furniture?
Ooh, well, I mean, just like theoretically, or like that I own or have been in. I have a secondhand leather chair on a swivel, and it's really hard to sit in and read because you fall asleep, or I fall asleep very quickly when I do that, and that's. So I guess I would say that one. It's very extremely comfortable.
How can you not like a chair that does that for you? That's there's comfort food and there's comfort furniture, right? So
exactly.
So which brings me to my last question. What would be your favorite comfort food to have in your comfort furniture?
Whatever is in front of me, unfortunately. I do I think I tweeted recently, like I think I said, I am currently binge watching food, which I am then eating, which is basically how that's something when I get stressed or something, I'm definitely a stress eater. It's often carbohydrate based, unfortunately. I would say, I don't know how, like in New York in particular, big, hot, soft pretzels are a thing. And I would say that would be a great comfort food.
Okay.
Salty and full of carbs and really not good for you and warm and all those things.
Isn't that awful that we live in a world where we have to be, kind of bombarded by, carbs are bad, very bad. And now I'm bad because I love carbs. Well, I'm supposed to love carbs. Carbs are built for me to love them. Okay. It's like saying someone's going to come out and say air is bad. We really have to figure out a way to not have air because it's just.
Well, right. Exactly.
I don't get it sometimes, but. All right, Jack. Well, we've learned some more. Someday somebody's going to have to ask me some of my favorites. I don't know because I feel like
let me ask you that. What's your favorite comfort food?
Oh boy, I would mimic whatever's in front of me, but I think pizza. Honestly, pizza, and it has to be I'm still finding I feel like I'm Don Quixote searching for the perfect pizza, and haven't quite. I have the recollections of pizza.
I'll give you a clue.
Yeah.
I'll give you a clue. It's somewhere in New York.
I'm sure. So, well, there was a place that was in Milwaukee where I grew up, and the guy that had it was Francesca's, and he was from New York and had moved into Milwaukee and had this little hole-in-the-wall pizza parlor.
Good.
Yeah. Oh, it was fantastic stuff, and I have yet to find quite that pizza again. He went out of business years ago, and it's just so I'm going to have to just keep shopping. But yeah, pizza, green olives if they're involved would be great. Some sausage, some whatever. But thin crust, crunchy. Thank you very much. So, anywho, so let's look at this whole thing called theater. You had a point in your talking points that live theater is not dead. It just needs reimagining. And I kind of, I looked at that, and there was a part of me that was somewhat offended not because you said it, because people say that, you hear that sort of thing, live theater, blah. And I honestly, maybe I'm super duper stupid, but sometimes I look at the world around us right now and I think the thing that's missing is more people need to see more live theater, because the stuff that's going on, some of the crap that's being, done to objectify, otherize other people in our lives is so exacerbated by this kind of, digital world where we can just say whatever we want to whoever we want. But live theater, you're right there in the midst of it. And it can be funny, it can be dramatic, but being right there in the midst of it is life-changing.
Yes. I couldn't agree more. The problem is that theater is, I sense, I may have said this last time, is that it feels like it's always on the verge. Everyone's always basically writing its obituary. And certainly throughout my lifetime, it's hard to compete with movies and television. And in a sense it does, but in a sense it doesn't. It's a very different animal because, like you said, being there in a live theater is something very unusual and incredibly, I think, it really sort of confers a sense of community and creates a sense of community on the people there. I just think most people don't have a sense of, most people have never been to a play, in America. Outside of maybe a school play or something like that. And they've never been to a professional play. And if they have, 9 out of 10 of them will have seen a musical, which again, musicals are wonderful. I'm not knocking them, but they're not, but like a play like Death of a Salesman or Fences by August Wilson or, you name it, any one of many other plays that are very entertaining, but also really very moving. Most people haven't seen them. They've read a couple of them in high school, but that ain't seeing them. And there's something really sort of, and I hate to use a hokey word like magical, but something certainly very potent about being in a theater, because unlike, say, watching a movie, it becomes, and I may have said this before, but very much dialogue between the audience and the actors on the stage. Yeah. And the event, the text is the same every night, hopefully, but the play is a little bit different every night, depending on 100 different factors. Yeah. And and only you, the people who are there in that moment, can fully remember it and appreciate it that way. So I agree. I think we should have theaters all over the place, and people should go to see them, and not view it as sort of like eating their vegetables either. It's got to be. It has. I think theater, like any art or entertainment, its primary obligation is to entertain, but I think in theater and plays, there's maybe more room for in-depth explorations and discussions about topics worthy of that. There's lots of stuff on TV, and there are movies that have done that as well. But that's and there are many, many, many plays that don't do that or don't attempt to do that, and that's fine too. But I think it adds a unique way of interacting and builds a sense of community that television and movies can't. Yeah. And I do think one of the things I keep coming back to in my view of the world is that what we really lack more than ever is a sense of community and interconnectedness with one another. And I think there are very few things better than theater at showing us that we are all interconnected. Yeah.
Well, that understanding that the things that these two characters in front of us are dealing with, the issues that involve their baggage that they're bringing into the equation, as well as involves the situation that they're in right at the moment, that we can usually have some sort of aha moment where it's like, yeah, I've struggled with that too. And when you're seeing a real person doing it right there in front of you, and there is something about the professional competency that, reputable, a professional theater has in crafting that is very different than a high school play. And I've directed scads of high school plays. I love working at community and, the school levels because you're getting the start, right? But that there's a very different thing happening there than there is happening when you're in, a repertory theater company, APT in our area, and watching that. And I wish there was a easier way to do that on a wide scale, like that. There would be theater pods in every community that would have, well-trained, technically well-trained as well as artistically informed souls that could, lead the band, if you will.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the thing too. I mean, because there's so many, most countries have, national theaters, so to speak. And of course, America doesn't, we don't have, national health care, well, we do, but it's obviously very limited compared to other countries. There's something about our culture that is sort of demonized the notion of communal events and communal responsibility as dictated to, as more conservative thinkers would see it, is dictated to by the government. But without it becoming political, I would love it if we funded some sort of national theater, which may have a center in Washington or Chicago or New York, but also would have lots of satellite theaters throughout the country, particularly in places that wouldn't normally allow for people to see professional theater, which is kind of, in a way, what New Normal Rep, my theater company, is trying to do. Obviously, we're just talking about the uniqueness of theater, and there are things that virtual theater simply can't do in terms of that communal experience. But it does, we do focus on plays and theatrical works, and the nature of the writing of a play is different than, say, that of a TV show or a movie. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I think the sort of the richness you describe of the dilemmas faced by the characters and that sort of thing that are sort of really lends itself to plays. We have that in there. And so it's a way of sort of, through our company, sort of, as long as you have online access, basically you can see some plays, or in the case of our latest work, you can listen to it. If you can listen to a podcast, and clearly you can because you're listening to this, you can listen to our plays.
Sure. So where do you think, is there a road to that? Is there a road to a national theater company that?
I honestly don't think so. I mean, I think it's so far down on the list of things. I mean, that Washington has to wrestle with at the moment. I think that there's probably not an appetite for it nationally in the powers that be. I sort of wish that there were. I think there's a feeling that these sorts of things are not necessarily bad. They're nice, but they're sort of they're luxuries. They're indulgences. And where I would disagree is I would say that I don't think art is a luxury. I think it is a basic necessary thing to have in order for a culture in a society to function correctly. I'm not saying it's more important than, or as important even than, say, access to healthcare or good schools, obviously. But the arts in general are, I think, fully essential for a society to reach its potential and for people and communities to reach their potential. God, I sound like a preacher here, but this is what I think. And so I think they're not luxuries, and they should be treated as such. In the 30s, I guess under Roosevelt and the New Deal, there was national, theaters, and exactly what we were talking about, where they would take professional actors and directors, and they would put them on the road, and they'd go throughout the country into places where they didn't have any access to theater, and it would be wonderful if we could get back to that again, but. I think we're ways from that. I mean, I think what's, what they call the Overton window, which is where I guess that it's what's considered like the acceptable range of politically viable beliefs are, is shifted so far to the right over the last 40 years that I think we're a long ways from getting that back into the discussion.
I think of like the CCC that FDR started to kind of jumpstart the economy way back in the 30s. And my dad was part of one of those civilian conservation corps, if I remember right. That underground. Wouldn't it be nice if there was that sort of thing for theater, that were just live events like that you had people going around with different projects that could be done to light the fire.
That's the thing. And, and of course, Roosevelt had that as part of the New Deal. But, my ex-wife is a speech pathologist, and she hasn't had, and by she, I mean she and her colleagues in New York State, the rate the New York State pays speech pathologists hasn't gone up since, I want to say 1997 or something like that. I mean, it hasn't, I'm not talking about gone up compared to cost of living adjustments. There's been no cost of living. So in essence, they're making far less than they used to. And so it's just, I mean, this is a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
But,
Holy cow. So something
so
that's...
I'm not optimistic about the government saying here,
right.
let's build a theater.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, do you think maybe our problem is too that we look to the government to solve things that, did the government sponsor Aeschylus? Euripides?
Right.
Maybe it's...
Well, I mean, to be honest, I don't know. Maybe they did. I don't know about history. But no, I mean, I don't know. And certainly in the traditional, there's room in the traditional sort of Edward Burkean conservative model of conservatism for communities to come together and for people to, individual organizations to do all these things too. Yeah, and yeah. I'm not suggesting it all needs to come from government, and I could see arguments mitigating against that, but I don't also see it coming necessarily from, in a big way, from private institutions either.
Right. Well, and the minute you do that, the private thing too. Who's going to regulate the message then at that point? That's, I'll give you money, but you have to tell a story I like, or.
Well, I mean, that's always a problem. I mean, that could be a problem with the government theoretically. Yeah. So I mean, it's. But that's an age-old thing, right? I mean, we're all I forget who, but someone said an artist's dream, they dream of money, which is, which I think I would say, well, who doesn't dream of money? But yeah, I mean, as artists, it's interesting too, because you go into the arts very often because you don't, quote unquote, care that much about money. You're not in it to make a lot of money, but you realize that money is very useful at buying things. Yeah. And, in order to sustain yourself and our economy and culture, you have to have, these plans and these dreams and these ideals are great, but you need some money to feed them. Yeah. And so that's always the struggle. It's a struggle for us too at New Normal Rep. It's trying to get grant money and individual subscriber donations and stuff like that to keep us moving. And that's always the big issue with theaters. I think is. I mean, I guess there are exceptions, but 9 times out of 10, the worries are all money related. It's how are we going to, fund this season? It would be great if our debates would be, well, what is our season going to look like? What plays are we going to pick? That's a nice, fun debate to have. But it's 9 out of 10 times. It's, well, how are we going to, find the money?
Yeah, money makes the vote go around, as Cabaret likes to say. So. Right. So another question coming down the line here of talking points. I love this talking points thing. I can look at it and think, okay, let's go to this then. How do you think that this ancient art form called theater, how do you think that it can evolve to keep up with the era of Netflix and chill? What is chill, by the way? Is that
well, I mean, apparently Netflix and chill is sort of a euphemism for coming over and having having sort of intimate relations with someone. So as a consequence, I can assure you, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Never seen it. To me, it's Netflix on sleep. I don't know.
I haven't Netflix out for me in that way yet. But listen, I think it can embrace it. I mean, I think one of the things, and I don't mean to keep bringing it back to New Normal Rep, but that's only area of experience from which I can speak directly, is that it's, theater is more accessible than any time in history. Everything is more accessible than it's ever been, which obviously is a detriment too, because you're competing against everything basically that's ever been done or recorded. But I think that's the way it can evolve. For example, the National Theatre of Great Britain, talking about national subsidized theaters, they have a streaming app, which is tremendously good, in which you can watch high quality video recordings of their plays. Now, video recordings of plays traditionally have been pretty all but unwatchable. And you'll lose a lot of that essential element that we were talking about earlier. But these are updated, and the recording techniques are such that between the clarity and the different camera angles, and that it does give you a real flavor of that. And I'm not sure why I'm spending so much time plugging the National Theatre, and they certainly don't need my help. But I would. But National Theatre Live is a great streaming app. Just one example of the ways in which theater is sort of adapting, and it's staying current not only technologically, but in terms of like things that life as it's really being lived by people. I mean, as much as I love Death of a Salesman, as much as I love Fences, and I think these plays are timeless and should be performed, equally urgently, if not more so, we need new voices, new playwrights talking about things that are not highfalutin. And I think some people think of the theater as like Euripides or Shakespeare or things like that, where people are in togas or tights or toga tights, which may be a thing. And sort of declaiming these speeches in a very sort of, let's face it, boring and not very, very human way. And I think plays need to be about recognizable people and recognizable circumstances. And so we need more of those and more ways of transmitting it. And so I think, New Normal Rec is doing our part, I think, in hoping that people will enjoy what we put out there. But yeah, it can't just be the classics. I think there's a place for the classics, and I think, that's important. But yeah, it have to be work that really says, oh my gosh, I so relate to this. This is exactly like my life. And I don't see this being talked about on TV or in the movies.
Right. So we've talked about previously, I think, as well in our discussion, but let's talk about NNR, because that is kind of an answer to that question, right? The New Normal is an organization that you started, co-founded?
Friends of myself and I started it.
Okay, and it started in 2020. Is that right?
It started in 2020 because it started out with just a group of actors and myself getting together via Zoom every week and just reading plays. And then, that was a time when a lot of people were trying to put together video like readings of plays, but they were just people reading in scripts in their apartments. And while that's great, we thought, well, there's probably a better way of doing it and a more sophisticated way of doing it. And we think in our first season, we sort of got there. We had 4 full-length plays by 4 different writers from a diverse group of writers dealing with very different issues, all of which ended up, I think, being in some level about community, although I have to tell you that was sort of accidental. We just wanted to put on 4 diverse plays of excellent quality. And we feel we achieved that. And we were very excited about the sort of democratizing nature of it. Now, people get a chance to see this who would normally never get a chance to see it. And so that for us, by no means is NNR an attempt to somehow compete with live theater. It's not in any way. And all of us in NNR, many have worked since then in theater, and I hope to have plays of mine, produced again in theaters and all these things. But this, to me, is a great ancillary way of providing a theatrical experience.
Sort of an augmentation from what I've seen and looking at the version of Jericho.
I think that's probably the better way.
So
yeah.
So I keep thinking of this phrase of. We have a tendency to think either or, but it's another one of these both and answers.
Yeah, very much so.
So what have you found to be the fruits of that, doing that? You're 3 years in now, roughly, right?
Yeah. The thing that people kept telling us in terms of the plays that they watched very much was because of the way we set it up, just aesthetically, they felt they were like in the scenes in a way that, in the play in a way that they don't in TV or movies or even theater, because the characters it's direct address even when they're talking to different characters in the scene, and so you're sort of very much involved in it, and there's an intimacy to it. which because it's oftentimes, I mean, you can watch it on television screens or whatever, but very often people watch it on computers, and so it's just you and that person face to face, and so that's what we've come away with is people saying that to us a lot, that there's a real intimacy to it, and they feel that they're very close, if not in the middle of the action.
Okay. And it's very much kind of like this Teams call that we're doing now, where the actors are talking with each other, but they're looking at the screen. So you're getting that kind of immersive.
Yes, exactly. But there's also there's green screens behind them. So the conceit is that basically they're all in the same room together. And that's the way we recorded all the plays in 2020, in 2021, which is during the pandemic, obviously, of course. And now we haven't mounted a full production since then because we're waiting on some more money, some grant money. In the audio play that we put out, the podcast play, which is really like an old-fashioned radio play in terms of sound effects and soundscapes, that we recorded together in the same room. But that was really exciting because some of us, actually I knew all of the people individually, but there were some people who had been working together for 2 years and I'd never met in person until that day. So that was a lot of fun. And so we recorded it together, and that's a different branch. In the UK, radio plays are done all the time. There are plays just performed on radio stations or put out in podcast form. And so in the US, that's starting to make a bit of a comeback a little bit, but we wanted to do that. And so we put out a play that is accessible on any podcast platform, and it's free. And so that really speaks to our hope to sort of democratize, the theatrical experience. And again, it's a play. It's not it's not a skit. It's not a TV show or something. It's a play.
Right. Is there just had a question of the format of that. You talked about there being kind of a green screen thing. I noticed with Jericho, the version that Marsha Mason, I think, worked with you on.
Yes. Yes.
That the backgrounds changed by virtue of where the people were. So at one point, Josh is calling from Israel, and he's got the temple is behind him. So it was a quick and easy way to establish that they are in different places, but. Without
and
having
just like any scenery backdrop would be in a theater.
Yeah. Did you find are those done live too as well as recorded? I mean, are there times where people are buying a ticket and coming in and it's being done then and there? And
we've had play readings, which again are very different, and those aren't like with backgrounds and green screens. Those are sort of like the meetings like we're having now, where the actors would be in their apartments and they would read. And we had several of those, and we hope to have more of those for works that are in development. And people can come in and see, and watch a live performance of it. And there's usually a talk back afterwards and a question and answer. And it's really invaluable for for audiences and playwrights too. For playwrights to hear these words out loud is very beneficial. I know as a playwright, I have to hear it out loud before I go anywhere with it to try and hone it and make it better. So we view that as sort of beneficial for everyone.
So I'm going to probe you more on Jericho, just because that play that really I don't know. I don't know if it was because I was identifying with. The lead characters too much, or what was going on, but the dysfunctionality of the family was hilarious on one level, but also extremely poignant. Mom's trying to figure things out, trying to do what she can do for her, sons, trying to help them, only to be met with, complete rejection in a way that she just can't even begin to understand. The two people are trying to find relationships that, one case was once and now is gone, or, is it going to be something? Is it not? And it's just a really wonderful cradle of the human condition. So, and then on top of it, you have this, I don't know what is it fair to call it, a conceit or the husband that's there, the conscience that's speaking to her throughout it, and is, I have to accept that that's her interpretation of him, but there's also a part of you that thinks like, well, maybe there is a spiritual component there where he is still involved. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, I try and leave that as loosey-goosey as possible.
So when you wrote that, it struck me that it was partially a play about 9/11 and what it had done to us nationally, internationally, and personally. And you have kind of a core. We're blowing the play. You're going to have to read the play. I'm not describing it anywhere near as well as it's written, but it seems like the core, for me, the core argument was coming to grips with either moving past it or not moving past it. And what moving past it looked like for the different characters. And I can't remember. Was it Beth, the main character, who has a line something to the effect of, there are some things we should just never get over.
Yeah, there are some things you shouldn't be able to recover from. Yeah.
So, yet she's trying to. And yet fundamentally, it's like she feels that she can't. She's not going to. And that's okay.
It's funny you mentioned it is clearly a play about 9/11. And the funny thing is that I kept saying as I was writing it and showing it to people, like, well, this isn't really about 9/11. 9/11 is just sort of the commonality in the backdrop. And I was really adamant about it. It's not about 9/11 because I felt like I wrote this several years ago. I wrote this in like late, like the 2008-ish, 2009-ish time. And I think I even started before then. And so I felt, well, there's no real, I don't have anything to say about 9/11, and I don't want it to be interpreted as that. And finally, a friend of mine, Evan Bergman, who directed the original production of it, said, it is kind of about 9/11, Jack, and it's okay that it's about. And I think that's what it was. I was very reticent to claim that because it implied with that perhaps might be the idea that I really have something to say about this horrific event, and I don't per se have anything to say about it. Certainly not on a sociopolitical level, but it's just about people coping with tragedy in their lives, and in burdens, internal and external, that they don't know how to process or how to share it or where to put it. And I think in that sense, it's, and some of them are via 9/11, some of them are not. But in that sense, it's not a 9/11 play. In that sense, it's really just a play about people trying to figure out what to do with the imperfection of their feelings and attitudes, and how to reconcile what they want to be with who they really are.
Right.
And these people are all striving for connections, and the connections are right there in front of them, and they have them sort of, but they can't quite make them stick the way they'd like them to, and they don't fit perfectly. And I think that's probably something most people can relate to.
Well, it strikes me that it is a 9/11 play, but it's not a 9/11 play in that it seeks to be a 9/11 play. It's that 9/11 is the crucible that it is bringing to a head, if you will, all of these different things. I mean, Beth has her demons that she has to deal with. And, I honestly thought one of the wonderful tie-ins was she's dealing with, did her husband, is he her husband? I guess I'm unclear.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did her husband die because he was helping other people? Did he get pushed by? Did he get, pushed over so that he couldn't get out, whereas other people did? And she was wrestling with, the anger that she would feel towards knowing that happened, or, was she, whatever, all the different possibilities. Right. And then here you have, is it Josh, the older?
Yeah, Josh, yeah.
The older brother? Okay. Who admits that he probably did do that, to someone as he was trying to get out. So it's like, okay, now you're the person I've been spending all this time despising, and now I put a face to it.
Right.
That to me is just a thing that happens all the time. Again, speaks back to one of our myriad of problems as a country right now is we're otherizing people and saying that they're awful people for doing this and that and the other thing. And it's like, well, no, but in the right circumstances, just about anybody can do this or that or the other thing. So what's your point?
Then where people are all, we don't, we're a lot more alike than what we would like to admit, I think, at times. And we don't know. We've all done things on some level, I think, that we are not proud of. And And maybe it's just me.
Yeah,
But
I'm there with you, man.
Yeah, you know, and there are things that, you know, we wish we could take back desperately, and we can't. And having to live with that truth, which is hardly, you know, a new revelation about the human condition, but I think, is one of the things that every generation of people that grows up, I mean, as we become adults and experience life, it is a new revelation for us every single time that there are things that we're going to do that we've done that we're going to really regret, some of which might change our lives or the lives of others forever. And you have to live with that. You have to go on. And sometimes things happen to you that are completely unfair, and you're misrepresented, or you're just a victim of chance, in which case, in the case of these characters, 9/11. And it asks unfair things of you, and it demands unfair things of you, and it puts unfair burdens on you, but you have to find a way to move on. Yeah. And I guess that's what this play is about, which is, I think, one of the reasons why I really wanted to make it funny, because otherwise it becomes a little burdensome.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me you kind of walk that line between being, is it didactic, you know, wanting to be instructional and burdensome versus enlightening, you know, and that is a profoundly difficult line to walk as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I mean, I do honestly feel that, and this is not false modesty, I do honestly feel I have like nothing to teach people. Like I never go into a play with the thinking of, well, this is an answer I want to provide for people. It's always a question I want to ask, and then, you know, explore these, you know, situations. You know, like what would I do, or how would I react, and would I be judgmental? And if I were judgmental, what mitigating factors am I not taking into consideration? You know, blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. So I like to sort of raise the stakes and put it into a crucible, as you say, and see how people behave, and try never to do it with real judgment either. I think there are moments in the play where every single person behaves poorly. But hopefully, if I've done my job right, because the actors were wonderful and Marsha Mason was a brilliant director, that you think, well, I understand why they did it. I may not necessarily love it, but I totally get it. It's a very human thing to do. Right. And I think that, you know, and that is the same sort of principle. It's a very different story. But the radio play Step 9 that we have out on the podcast platforms for free. I mean, it's that sort of same jumping off point in terms of, like, you know, there's a real moral dilemma. There's a real crucible people are placed in, and let's see how they react. And even people who love each other, you know, not being able to quite grasp each other and ending up hurting each other without meaning to, that kind of thing. But again, hopefully also funny, because otherwise it does become. Yeah, there's got to be some fun to it, because there is fun, right? You kind of step back a little bit and go, oh, okay. Do you? I think one of the things that's fascinating to me is the concept of all these characters that initially, different characters you look at and go, I'm kind of a jerk, but I found, you know, it struck me that there's a very even-handed treatment of your characters that, as you said, at some point you get to the point where, like, oh, okay, now I get why they're that way. All right. I can cut them some slack now. So do you find that you're going through that process, or is that always your intent, that as you're writing that you believe that there's a reason for all these people to be the way they are, and you're just going to let them be who they are and let that take it where it will? I think the answer is a little bit of both. I mean, I try and let the character sort of dictate what happens, but if I'm doing my job right, they are being human beings, and by definition, that means that they're doing things that are less than perfect, sometimes, and can even be infuriating or upsetting. But they have reasons. Everyone has reasons, and that doesn't dismiss. That doesn't absolve them of any of consequences. But I wanted very much to not have anyone sort of be cartoonishly, static and like cardboard-like in terms of their obvious, like a straw man, so to speak, of well, this person is wrong and in the wrong in their thinking, and this person is in the right in their thinking, and there has to obviously be a middle ground, because and of course, again, tying it back to the real world, I think the biggest danger these days is that we're also siloed, so to speak, in like our viewpoints and use the word other, to other the other person, to otherize them. That's going on far more even than it was happening when I wrote the play. And it's really important to note that these people, be it left or right, whom you feel are no longer incorrect about, say, I disagree with the rate they want to, put margin taxes on, or disagree with the capital gains tax. If you feel now these people are evil, or either way, they're either out to destroy America with their ugly wokeism, or with their fascist totalitarianism, and both things can be true. They both can hold these beliefs, but also when you know them individually, you think, they're human beings and they have decent, impulses.
Right.
And that's, I think, one of the great quandaries that we face, is how to be able to disagree politically, but also see the commonality in one another. And so I think that's one of the things that I think I try to do in my plays, and I think all good writers do try to do in their plays. I have a play called Fellow Travelers, which we talked about last time, about Elia Kazan and Arthur Miller. And it would have been very easy to demonize Elia Kazan. And one of my challenges was, I'm going to try not to judge him, and if the audience wants to judge him, that's absolutely their right. But my job is not to make a saint out of Miller or a demon out of Kazan, and and just tell the story as if they were people, because it turns out they weren't.
Yeah, we all have demons. So, Jack, I'm trying to be respectful of the time and respectful of the fact that you have a dog that needs your TLC. So,
Yes.
we can keep talking. I hope again. We'll just.
Yes, I hope so. Let's face it, I'm not doing much, so I'm always around.
Well, you didn't have a critical house emergency this week. That's good. So,
this week.
But maybe this can be one of those things where we check in with one another and just say, okay, what's the play going on today? Because
I would love that.
What's the old Shakespearean thing? All the world is a stage, and we are but players in it. Yeah,
that's right.
It's and I'm still not quite sure if it's a comedy or a drama or just a farce. I'm not sure what version we're in right now as a country. Do you?
Right.
Care to elaborate?
Well, there's that. I forget who said it. There's a famous line of the history. I think I forget the order it's in, but I think there's one line that basically says that history plays out first as tragedy and then as farce.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think the opposite is also true.
Very much so. Jack, thanks so much. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your energy. So please take care of yourself until we meet again.
Yes, please. Soon, I hope.
Thanks for listening to us, folks, here on Frame of Reference Profiles in Leadership.